The book of Joshua in the Bible, wouldn't it be considered a reliable source of ancient Hebrew history?
And David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher?
So now that you have read this quote from the book of Joshua, now read what is in the book of Jasher. Now in the book of Jasher, in chapter 7, verses 49 to 51, it reads, And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects. And the king and the princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amthello, the daughter of Cornebo, a Cushite priest. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. So who was the son that was born to Terah and a Cushite woman? Now this son was Abraham. But how can we be so sure Terah's wife was a Cushite Nubian woman? Well, the Bible tells us that the family of Nimrod, the son of Cush, ruled over the land of Ur, which is Babylon, Iraq, when Terah's family called this place home.
And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar.
Now the scriptures say that Terah was 7 years old when he bore Abraham. At those times he was a prince to the king Nimrod, who raised him in those days and dignified him above all the princes that were with him. So let's backtrack again so we can understand the true ethnicity of the forefathers of Jacob and the children of Israel. Now, if Nimrod's Cushite family ruled the land of Ur, of Terah's nativity in the Bible, and if Terah held a high position as prince in the Cushite royal family with Nimrod, we should assume that his wife Amthello, the daughter of priest Cornebo, was most likely of Cushite stock. This Cushite woman, Amthello, and the Hebrew man Terah will give birth to Abraham. This will make Abraham an Afro-Asiatic brown-skinned man, not a white-skinned European-looking man like today's white Jews. So is there any archaeological or DNA proof to back this up? Well, there sure is. Now the maternal DNA of the Bantus West Africans, the Bantus South Africans, Bantus East Africans, including Ethiopians, Ethiopian Jews, Dravidian Indians in South India, and Black Pacific Islanders can all be found to be related to one another. In the Bet Alpha Synagogue in the Bet Alpha Synagogue National Park near Bet Shean, Israel, it shows a mosaic from over 1,500 years ago which depicts Abraham and Sarah with dark brown skin and afros. But don't take my word for it. The first century Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus, who lived in the 1st century AD, had these thoughts on the Hebrews. In his literary work, Histories 5.2 to 5, he writes about the Hebrews. Many again say that they are a race of Ethiopian origin, while other translations read, many assert that the Hebrews are a race of Ethiopian origins. Now, if the early Hebrews were a race of Ethiopian origin, they must have been black to look upon, as the meaning of the word Ethiopian can be linked to the Greek word meaning burnt faces or dark skin tones. Now, these characteristics and skin complexion in ancient times were only attributed to a people living in Africa and all the way across the Arabian Sea to India and Asia. Now, there was a Greek historian named Ephorus who lived during 400 BC who quoted, "The eastern Ethiopians, for 2 nations of this name served in, the Ethiopians were considered as occupying all the south coast of both Asia and Africa." And he added that this is an ancient opinion of the Greeks. Now the Greek historian Herodotus, who lived during 490 BC, he quoted that the eastern Ethiopians for two nations of the same name served in the army were marshaled with the Indians. They differed in nothing from the other Ethiopians, save in their language and the character of their hair. For the eastern Ethiopians have straight hair, while they of Libya or Africa are more woolly haired than any other people in the world. Now take this in consideration. As early as the 12th century AD, mention is made of the black Jews in southern India and the native black Semitic people they lived amongst in exile. The Gentile Jewish traveler from Spain, Benjamin of Tudela, speaking of Kolam on the Malabar coast, writes in his itinerary, throughout the island, including all the towns thereof, live several thousand Israelites. The inhabitants are all black, and the Jews also. Now these people later became known as the Black Malabar Jews in Kerala, India, and later the Gentile Sephardic Jews around the time of the 15th century AD would mysteriously find their way to India, where these Sephardic immigrants would be known as the Paradesi white Jews. Now the descendants of the Black Malabar or Cochin Jews had their DNA analyzed. In a 2009 DNA report confirmed that the Ethiopian Jews of Beta Israel and the Indian Jews of B'nai Israel and Cochin have similarities in their DNA. Now, one chronicle in India tells how a group of Jews descended from the Assyrian exile of the 10 northern tribes made their way to Calicut, Kerala by way of Arabia, Yemen. And a Malayalam Jewish song from Kerala, India suggests that the Jews of the ancient town of Pallora may have come from Yemen. It is a known fact that many of the dialects of Malayalam in South India have traces of Assyrian, Aramaic, and Hebrew influences. Now, in regards to the Greeks were classified as black Ethiopians and black Egyptians under the term Ethiops, Nubian, and Niger, simply because these names were associated with dark-skinned people. English archaeologist Sir Godfrey Higgins, who lived in the 1700s, would write the following about the Ethiopians. According to many ancient testimonies, the inhabitants of Sudan, Egypt, Arabia, Palestine, Western Asia, and India were Ethiopians, therefore Africans. Back in that era, there were two lands called Ethiopia, one on the east of the Red Sea and the other on the west of it. And a very great nation of blacks from India did rule almost all over Asia in a very remote era, in fact beyond the reach of history of any of our records. Now Strabo was the Greek historian who lived around 63 BC and he died around 24 AD. Now he spent most of his travels in Kush and in Egypt. Now he stated that the whole of India is traversed by rivers. As for the people of India, those in the south are like the Ethiopians in color, although they are like the rest in respect to the countenance or appearance and also hair. For on account of the humidity of the air, the hair does not curl, whereas those in the north are like the Egyptians. Now Arrian of Nicomedia, a Greek historian who lived during the 1st century AD, in his literary work Indica, he quoted that the appearance of the inhabitants is also not very different in India and Ethiopia. The southern Indians have rather more like Ethiopians, as they were black to look on, and their hair is black. Only they are not so stub-nosed and woolly-haired as the Ethiopians. The northern Indians are most like the Egyptians physically. So after all this evidence of the mixing of Ham seed with the descendants of Eber, isn't it interesting that Abram's name was later changed to Abraham? The Most High changed Abram's name to Abraham because he was to be the father of a multitude of nations, mainly through the mixing of Ham seed, not Japheth's seed. Nevertheless, by seeing all this with evidence and using critical thinking, we should be able to understand how the children of Israel got their brown skin complexion, something we don't see with the people who came to Israel in 1948 calling themselves Jews.
Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood, and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord.
Now Ham had a son named Mizraim, who would be the father of Egypt, or his most ancient name, Kemet, which is the ancient Egyptian word for black. The ancient Egyptians called themselves Kam or Kam-O, which means black people or black god people. Everyone knows by seeing countless pictures of Egyptian drawings that the ancient Egyptians were a race of brown black people. It is also a known fact that the other black nations ruled as the pharaohs of Egypt as well. The black Libyans ruled over Egypt in the 22nd to 23rd dynasties under Shoshenq I, Orsakan II, and Eaput II. This was in the BC era, over 1,000 years before the Muslim Arabs invaded Egypt or Libya. The Nubians of Sudan and Ethiopia, or Kush, also ruled Egypt during the 25th dynasty. Their pictures from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago show them to be black, despite the white Egyptian Arabs who we commonly see today in North Africa. Now, it is a known fact that when white people visit Egypt today, the locals immediately recognize them as Kawaga, which means foreigners, despite what is portrayed in Hollywood movies. But when African Americans visit Egypt, they are often mistaken for native Egyptians and are referred to as Masri or Mizri, meaning Egyptians in Arabic, which is based off the Hebrew word Mizraim for Egypt. In many cases, African Americans have also been referred to as Ibn Yaqub by the Arab locals when visiting the historical pyramids. Ibn Yaqub basically means son of Jacob in Arabic. So why would the local Arab Egyptians refer to black people as the sons of Jacob or the Egyptians? In the world today, many Christians are realizing that there has been a huge cover-up of real biblical history. Satan knows that if he can hide the true identity of the ancient Egyptians and the sons of Ham, he can keep the real Israelites from waking up to their true identity. So how has this mastermind deception continued for so long? It's easy. The powers to be simply have to present another people to the world to be the Egyptians and the Israelites of the Bible using the mass media or Western education. The mass media for centuries has whitewashed the true black identity of the ancient Egyptians. They know that the head busts, the stone statues, the mummified pharaohs of Egypt, and the pictures on the walls in Egypt depict a different Egyptian than what is shown on TV today. This is why on TV, when our channels report from North Africa, Egypt, Israel, or the Middle East, they always show pictures of white-skinned Arabs. On the movie screen, the Egyptians are just plain white, which is plain wrong. According to biblical history, Abraham's son Ishmael is birthed by a black Egyptian woman named Hagar. In the Bible, she's referred to as Hagar the Egyptian. Hagar later gets a wife for her son Ishmael from black Egypt. Now, this would technically make the Ishmaelite Arabs back then and today black. After all, if Abraham was a black-skinned Shemitic man and Hagar was a black-skinned Hamite, their offspring should also be black. This can be proven by the historical writings of the ancient Arabs. Now, 7th century AD Arab poet Miskin al-Darimi quoted, "I am Miskin, for those who know me, my color is dark, the color of the Arabs." Now, Arab linguist Ibn Mandur, who lived around 1260 AD, wrote in his book Lisan al-Arab that, quote, "The predominant complexion of the Arabs is dark brownish black, and that of the non-Arabs is white." Now, Ibn Mandur also quoted that non-kinky hair is the kind of hair that most non-Arabs like the Romans and Persians have, while kinky hair is the kind of hair that most Arabs have. So if Ishmael had a black Egyptian mother named Hagar, and he also had an Egyptian wife, the evidence of black Egyptian physical traits should be seen in people with true Egyptian ancestry or true black Arab ancestry. The truth is, the white Arabs and the white European Jews' real biblical identity has been hidden today because the term Semitic has been used to describe them since they currently live in biblical Shemitic lands. However, maternal DNA studies reveal that the true origin of today's Arabs and Jews comes from the many sons and women of Japheth, who dwelt in Central Asia, most notably modern-day southern Russia, Western Russia, aka the Pale of Settlements, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. The Seljuk Turks, the Oghuz Turks, the Uzbeks, Kurds, and other Turkish Hunnish groups would eventually over time migrate west to the Middle East and Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. They would adopt Islam as their religion and then conquer North Africa, the Levant, and Jerusalem under the latter name, the Ottoman Turkish Islamic Caliphate. In 1948, the European people of Turkish, Hunnic, Bulgar, Slavic, Khazar, and Germanic descent who converted to Judaism would conquer British Mandate Palestine, otherwise known as Arab Palestine, renaming it Israel. So as you can see, the true ethnicity of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the Israelites cannot be taught correctly in the church or on TV unless we have a clear understanding of the ethnicity of the ancient Egyptians. This is because the biblical Ishmaelite Arabs were a people